Hey everyone, this is Rob Ryder. Is Trump now the arch treasurer? That's one of the questions we're going to ask. I don't think we'll be able to answer it, but I ask it anyways and show some proofs. And the FTC, or good faith versus unfair and deceptive acts. So today is Queen Elizabeth II's coronation day. It's June 2nd, 2020. But the question is the Queen, or this gentleman who calls himself King John III, or the United States, now the defender of the faith? So that's one little section. It's just for fun. But the main topic today is this executive order preventing online censorship that President Trump signed on the 28th of May, 2020, which we're going to read and see what it says in there and then follow what it says to do. And I'll show you what I've attempted to do based on what the actual executive order said. But what this order does is it leads to the idea that, when you put things online, like on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, so forth, you're engaging in commerce or trade, right? And the FTC is the entity that has jurisdiction over matters of unfair and deceptive acts having to do with trade, which includes commerce. So in Webster's Dictionary, 1828, trade is defined as the act of or business of exchanging commodities by barter, or the business of buying and selling for money, commerce, traffic, barter. Da-da-da-da. Well, commerce, in a general sense, interchange or mutual exchange of goods, wares, products, productions, or property of any kind between nations or individuals, either by barter or by purchase or sale or trade. Well, then trade and barter really sound like they're trade and commerce, sound like they're synonyms for each other. But they're certainly related to each other. But commerce has a much wider definition than just, buying and selling of goods. It's the intercourse between individuals, interchange of work, business, civilities, or amusements, mutual dealings in common life, familiar intercourse between the sexes. I wonder what Webster had in mind there. Interchange, reciprocal communications, as there is a vast commerce of ideas. So in other words, sending mail is commerce. Right? It doesn't have to have anything to do with money. It's just the exchanging of ideas. Intercourse between people. Having a conversation. These are all, things that fall under the heading of commerce. And so that's the main thing, was what was Trump trying to tell us when he posted this executive order and gave some pretty specific things to do in there if you have a complaint against these entities. And as it turns out, if you were to have that style of complaint against another entity, well, you would take it to the FTC also, because the FTC has jurisdiction in matters of unfair and deceptive acts, and they had another word added in there. We'll see what it is in just a second. So what's going on, though, with this idea of Trump now the arch treasurer? Well, that would go first. If we went to the Treaty of Peace of 1783, which, after the war, now we're going to make love or make peace with England. Ratified and proclaimed by the Congress of the United States. So this is in 1784, which is before the Constitution was written. So the United States, the Congress of the United States, existed before the Constitution was written. After the Constitution, it became the Congress of the United States of America. But apparently the Continental Congress, the Congress of the United States, it never really was disbanded. It would just quit meeting. And the secretary of the Continental Congress had the Great Seal, which he gave to the president after the signing of the Constitution. But they never really did disband this Continental Congress. A little interesting history. But in here it said that in the name of the Holy and Divine Trinity, having pleased the divine province to dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent King George III, By the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, Defender of the Faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Arch-Treasurer, and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. Right? So King George III claimed that he has jurisdiction over the United States of America, which isn't the same as United States. It's United States of America, which existed before the before the Constitution. Also, this, we call it the colonies. He used to call it the Great Britain or North American United States of America or something like that. British America, United States of America. I can't remember how he had, but he had some phrase that had United States of America in it as the title of the property he owned, prior to there being, when it was just the colonies. So he called it the United States of America. Well, that isn't the United States, that's the United States of America. That's the jurisdiction of King George III and his successors. So if you ended up in that jurisdiction and thought you were in the United States, you weren't. You were in a foreign jurisdiction that's sharing the same territory as the United States. That was the agreement of the Constitution, as far as I can tell, right? This union of United States of America, probably better said, the United States of America, which is the entity that was created under the Articles of Confederation, and this United States of America, which King George is claiming, of which he was also saying he was the Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. So, let's look at some things that have gone on here just recently. Trump was issuing these checks, right? Which they're not really checks; they're economic income payments, where he had signed on the left-hand side and somebody else had signed on the right-hand side. Right? Well, if you look at money, like a dollar bill or something, the treasurer signs on the left-hand side, and who is it? The secretary signs on the right-hand side. Yeah, Secretary of Treasury on the right-hand side, Treasurer of the United States on the left-hand side. So he is signing where the Treasurer of the United States would sign. Okay, and that isn't on a normal check. There's only one signature on the right-hand side, right? But there isn't one on the left. So you could say that this check has had one more thing done to it than this check has, right? This check has already been converted. This check hasn't. This check is good for, it's like legal tender, right? That's what makes it legal tender. It has a countersign on it. It's good for debts, public and private. Or just a check like this is only good for debts, only public or private. I don't know which one you would say it is, but, it's one or the other. So, these are two different species of checks. It's like he's writing out of a different checkbook. So, that's interesting. Well, the other thing that happened was here recently, some guy is claiming that he's King John III, right? And this is easy enough to find. You can just go Google King John III. I don't know why it's doing this now. I didn't want to really watch a video. Hang on a second here. So, anyways, on YouTube, there's a number of videos that have been posted in the last week or so. They have to do with this guy named King John III, or Halleck, who says he's King John III, who gives his reasoning why that is. And, so part of it is that he is saying that, this is why the Queen is no longer in Buckingham Palace, as she's been kicked out. This is why Pope Francis got rid of all of his titles, which he did do on March 25th in the New Year book for the Vatican. He used to have all the different titles the Pope would use before his name, and now it starts with his name, and all those titles are under a separate heading that say historical titles. It's like he relinquished all his titles. Now there's a cardinal in the church that says that's because he's taken over the church, He's not a subject to. Now he's taken a higher position, basically. And this guy, this Halleck, is saying, he did it because of this document that he sent that's supposed to have gone through this thing called the common law court, which I don't know where it is, and da 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 da. But he had said that Trump had been made a placeholder until he takes his office. And I'm going to say to King John III, well, and that the Vatican has agreed to this, and the Vatican had been over commerce and so forth, right? So all that's gone to Trump now. But I would agree that they would do that, but I don't think they'll give it to you. I'd say they'll give it to the United States. Because way back in the day, sir, I'll show you this. I hate to bust your bubble, but in the Chicago Tribune, May 5th, 1903, there was a archbishop that said that that when the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. So if the Pope was going to do anything, it sounds like what he would just do is make Trump the arch-treasurer and, keep it there. And have the United States now be in charge of the defending of the faith. And here's Trump standing in front of St. John's Church in D.C. yesterday, holding the Bible. Right? Dispersed all the frickin' belligerents and went and grabbed the Bible out of the church. He's defended the faith. So, yeah, what's all that about? It's beyond that. I really can't say what's going on. I think it's, if you're interested, go read, go see what this King John III has to say. At one time, the Prince George, which, apparently Queen Elizabeth II is illegitimate. At some point in the past, they put in an illegitimate king, and she's in that line. And this Halleck is saying this other line that he's in, that's the actual true line of the kingship. But, that all happened after this idea of King George III, I believe. I have to go back and actually look. I guess I didn't look to see where they're saying this break happened at. But at this time, this man was the arch-treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. And I think the Pope just made him the arch-treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. So he got a promotion in the United States of America because he claimed to be the president of the United States of America, but that's like as a corporation. So the arch-treasurer in this English system would have been I believe it would have been the chancellor, which is actually the king's conscience, which would have been why the Pope got rid of his title of Vicar of Christ, because he gave it to Trump. Right now, he's the deputy of Christ. He's the king's conscience. The queen was never, if the queen was illegitimate, she was never the king's conscience. That's why, the Christian church fell apart in the world, is because there was nobody defending the faith. And they said that, when she took her coronation, that there's supposed to be some stone that they keep in Scotland that's supposed to be under her coronation throne, and that they had taken it. Right? So it was, faulty from the beginning. It was just, it was color of law coronation. So, okay, well, enough on that. That's just some interesting, tidbits of other stuff going on. But, here, this is the rest of it. So this lady here, this is supposed to be the Treasury of the United States, right? Treasury of the United States, U.S. Department of Treasury. And it says presently that it's Jovita Carranza of California, June 17, 2017 to present. But now this woman is the administrator of the SBA, which would mean then, well, according to this, they haven't replaced her yet. She's no longer there, right? So if the treasurer wasn't available to do the duties of the treasurer, which would be to, sign the money, Federal Reserve notes, legal tender, then the arch treasurer, who the treasurer works for, could do it. And I think that's what Trump is showing here, right? That he's the... Where are you? Right, he's the arch treasurer. He didn't say he's the treasurer, Donald J. Trump. He said he's President Donald J. Trump, who ex officio, if he was given the titles, would now be the arch treasurer. And I think he created legal tender with these. So we're actually paying debt off with these checks, as opposed to adding to the debt by taking checks like this that still need to be converted. Because you would take this to the bank, and then they would convert it, and the bank would take their fee for doing the conversion. But Trump, bypassed the banks and just did it himself. Okay, I don't know what you all think about that, but that was my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now let's go look at this. Let's go look at this executive order and what it has to do with the FTC and what we might use it for. So hang on just a second. All right, so on May 28, 2020, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows, right? He's doing this under two different jurisdictions, the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. Well, that's King George's jurisdiction. Nevertheless, because I couldn't highlight this as the one that's right online, I had to download it, copy and paste so that I could mark it up a bit. So we're going to look at it this way, and it's not that long, so I think we'll just read the whole thing and see what it had to say, and then go compare that to what it says at the Federal Trade Commission. And when you do those things and spend a little time at it, you might end up filing a consumer report to the FTC, which is what Robert Allen Rytlewski did a couple of times. And you can also do, this is the great one, you can do identity theft reports. I am a victim of identity theft. This is my official statement about a crime. That's something that you don't get to see every day when you're filling out paperwork for these government sites. So let's go back and read a bit. Okay, give me just 1 second. Okay, policy. Free speech is a bedrock of American democracy. Our founding fathers protected the sacred right with the First Amendment of the Constitution. The freedom to express and debate ideas is the foundation of all our rights as a free people. In a country that has long cherished freedom of expression, we cannot allow a limited number of online platforms to handpick the speech that Americans may access and convey on the internet. This practice is fundamentally un-American and undemocratic. When large, powerful social media companies censor opinions with which they disagree, they exercise a dangerous power. They cease functioning as passive bulletin boards and ought to be viewed and treated as content creators. The growth of online platforms in recent years raises an important question about applying the ideals of the First Amendment to modern communication technology. Today, many Americans follow the news, stay in touch with friends and family, and share their views on current events through social media and other online platforms. As a result, these platforms function in many ways as the 21st century equivalent of the public square. Don't touch, people. That's the common carrier. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube yield immense, if not unprecedented, power to shape the interpretation of public events, to censor, delete, and disappear information, and to control what people see or do not see. As president, I have made clear my commitment to free and open debate on the internet. Such debate is just as important online as in our universities, our town halls, and our homes. It is essential to sustain our democracy. I did turn this back on, didn't I? Yes, okay, thank you. Online platforms are engaging in selective censorship that is harming our national discourse. Tens of thousands of Americans have reported, among other troubling behaviors, online platforms flagging content as inappropriate, even though it does not violate the stated terms of service, making announced and unexplained changes to company policies that have the effect of disfavoring certain viewpoints and deleting content and entire accounts with no warning, no rationale, no recourse. Before we go any further, what he's going to tell you to do is go file a claim with the FTC if this has happened to you. Right? They're the ones in charge of this shit. This is all commerce. Okay, but back to what he said. Twitter is now selectively decides to place a warning label on certain tweets in a manner that clearly reflects political bias. As has been reported, Twitter seems never to have placed such label on other politicians' tweets. As recent as last week, Representative Adam Schiff was continuing to mislead his followers by peddling the long disproved Russian collusion hoax, and Twitter did not flag those tweets. Surprisingly, its officers in charge of so-called site integrity has flaunted his political bias in his own tweets. At the same time, online platforms are invoking inconsistent, irrational, groundless justifications to censor and otherwise restrict American speech here at home. Several online platforms are profiting from and promoting the aggression and disinformation spread by foreign governments like China. One United States company, for example, created a search engine for the Chinese Communist Party that would have blacklisted searches for human rights, hid data unfavorable to Chinese Communist Party, and tracked users determined appropriate for surveillance. Right? And tracked users determined appropriate for surveillance. It also established research partnership with China that provided direct benefits to the Chinese military. Other companies have accepted advertisements paid by the Chinese government that spread false information about Chinese mass imprisonments of religious minorities, thereby enabling their abuses of human rights. They have also amplified China's propaganda abroad, including by allowing the Chinese government officials to use their platforms to spread disinformation regarding the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic and to undermine pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. As a nation, we must foster and protect diverse viewpoints in today's digital communications environment where all Americans can and should have a voice. We must seek transparency and accountability from online platforms and encourage standards and tools to protect and preserve integrity and openness in American discourse and freedom of expression. Section 2. Protections against online censorship. It is the policy of the United States. Public policy. Been talking about that in other videos. It is the policy of the United States to foster clear ground rules promoting free and open debate on the internet. Prominent among these ground rules governing the debate and immunity from liability is created by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230C, which is 47 U.S.C. 230, Section C. It is the policy of the United States that the scope of that immunity should be clarified. The immunity should not extend beyond its text and purposes to provide protection from those who purport to provide users a forum for free and open speech, but in reality use their power over vital means of communication to engage in deceptive pretextual actions, stifling free and open debate by censoring certain viewpoints. I'll stop for a second. So this 47 U.S.C. 230, right, it gives them immunity if they basically leave things alone, but, right, if they act like a publisher and start to edit, well, then they shouldn't have those protections, is basically his point. Back to the executive order, Section 230C was designed to address early court decisions holding that if an online platform restricted access to some content posted by others, it would thereby become a publisher of all the content posted on its site for purposes of torts, such as defamation. Stop again. So torts are one of those things that's what general liability insurance is for. It's for strict liability torts. It doesn't matter if they meant to do the wrong, they did the wrong, such as defamation, and so you should be able to file a claim for a tort violation. And that'll be the next part of this, which I don't think I'll get into this video. It's just a little bit too much to do. But with general liability insurance, if it is both a first-party and third-party insurance policy, then if you have your own liability insurance policy, you should be able to file a claim against your insurance. It's called no-fault insurance. They pay the claim, and then they go against the person who created the controversies insurance and take it from them, right? But, you're not supposed to have to be involved in a litigation. It's no-fault insurance. We have it here in Michigan for car insurance, but all it really is, when you go look at the definitions, it's any first-party insurance policy is a no-fault insurance policy, and I say, well, that's what general liability insurance is. It's both a first party and a third party insurance policy. And as soon as I can get that proved, well, then I'll be able to use it. But, that's one of the other projects I'm working on. We're not quite there yet. Okay, back to what the president had to say. As the title of Section 230C makes clear, the provisions provide a limited liability protection to the provider of an interactive computer service, such as an online platform, that engages in Good Samaritan blocking of harmful content. In particular, Congress sought to provide protections for online platforms that attempted to protect minors from harmful content and intended to ensure that such provisions would not discourage from taking down harmful material. The provision was also intended to further the express vision of Congress that the Internet is a forum for true diversity of political discourse. 47 U.S.C. 230A3. The limited protections provided by the statute should be construed with these purposes in mind. In particular, subparagraph C2 expressly addresses the protections for civil liability and specifies, civil liability insurance, and specifies that the interactive computer service provider may not be liable on account of its decision in good faith. I talked about that in videos too. Good faith. To restrict access to content that it considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, or excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. It is the policy of the United States to ensure that to the maximum extent permissible under law, this provision is not distorted to provide liability protection for online platforms, far from acting in good faith to remove objectionable content. Instead, engage in deceptive or pretextual actions, often contrary to their stated terms of service, to stifle viewpoints with which they disagree. Section 230 was not intended to allow a handful of companies to grow into titans controlling the vital avenues of our national discourse under the guise of promoting open forums for debate, and then to provide those behemoths blanket immunity when they use their power to censor content and silence viewpoints that they dislike. When an interactive computer service provider removes or restricts access to content and his actions do not meet the criteria of subparagraph C2A, it is engaged in editorial conduct. You just crossed the line. It is the policy of the United States that such providers should properly lose the limited liability shield of paragraph C2A and be exposed to liability like any traditional editor or publisher that is not an online provider. And if you look at, stopping now what the president had to say, if you look at a general liability insurance policy, it has in there protections from slander and libel and things that are published. The question is, do you go and file the claim with your insurance and say it happened, or do you file it with the insurance policy of the person that did it? Well, if you file it with the insurance policy of the person that did it, that's a third-party insurance claim. If you file it with your insurance policy, it's a first-party insurance claim. And I say general liability insurance is both first and third party, So go get your own insurance and file it against yours. It'd be much easier because you're going to file it as a claim to be settled instead of a suit to be defended. That's what makes it this, first and third party. Because in one case, it's just you're filing a claim to have your claim settled, which is what you would do in Michigan if you were involved in an accident. It's not your fault. You still take it and give it to your insurance policy. They settle with you, and they go get it from the person that was at fault. Well, that's how we should be doing it today, under general liability insurance. And if they release these people from their liability, you could do it that way. But what Trump is showing is, well, what I'll do is you can file a claim with the FTC, and they'll handle it for you as a third-party claim. That's what I think's happening. I may be reading a little bit too much into it, but what are you going to do? Okay, back to what the president had to say. To advance the policy described in Section A of this section, subsection A of this section, all executive departments and agencies should ensure that their application of subsection 230C properly reflects the narrow purpose of the section and take appropriate actions in this regard. In addition, within 60 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Commerce, that would be the Secretary, in consultation with the Attorney General and acting through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, shall file a petition for rulemaking with the Federal Communications Commission, requesting the FCC expeditiously propose regulations to clarify the interaction between some paragraphs C1, C2 of subsection 230, in particular, clarify and determine the circumstances under which provider of an interactive computer service that restricts access to content in a manner not specifically protected by C2A may also not be able to claim protection under paragraph C1, subparagraph C1, which merely states that the provider shall not be treated as a publisher or speaker for making third-party content available and does not address the provider's responsibility for its own editorial decisions. The conditions under which the action restricted access to availability of material is not taken in good faith within the meaning of subparagraph C2A of section 230, particularly whether actions can be taken in good faith if they are deceptive, pretextual, or inconsistent with provider's terms of service. Keep that word deceptive. We like the word deceptive. Taken after failing to provide adequate notice, reasonable explanation, meaningful opportunity to be heard, or other proposed regulations that the NTIA concludes may be appropriate to advance the policy prescribed in subsection A of this section. What policy is that? It's the policy of the United States. It's all about the policy of the United States, right? We need to get the policy of the United States to be in our favor, and, well, then it's good to be in the United States. Protecting federal tax dollars from financing online platforms that restrict free speech. The head of each executive department and agency shall review its agency's federal spending on advertising and marketing paid to online platforms. Such review shall include the amount of money spent, the online platform that receives the federal dollars, and the statutory authorities available to restrict their receipt of advertising dollars. There's a thing about if you accept federal grants or money, that now you have to follow the federal law. So, within 30 days of the date of this order, the head of each agency shall report its findings to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. The Department of Justice shall review the viewpoint-based speech restrictions imposed by each online platform identified in the report described in Section B of this section, and assess whether any online platform are problematic vehicles for government speech due to viewpoint description or discrimination, deception to consumers, or other bad practices. Federal review of unfair or deceptive acts or practices. It is a policy of the United States. that large online platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, I added that myself, as critical means of promoting the free flow of speech and ideas today should not restrict protected speech. The Supreme Court has noted that social media sites, as the modern public square, can provide perhaps the most powerful mechanism available to private citizens to make his or her voice heard. Communication through these channels has become important for meaningful participation in American democracy, including to petition elected leaders. These sites are providing an important forum for public and other engaged free expression of debate. And so I say, well, that's what I've been doing. All these videos is me petitioning my elected leaders saying, hey, this stuff is wrong. People have a proper oath of office. Somebody stole my frickin' my veterans benefits from me, whatever it is. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these things, right? We're using it as a way to petition elected government, our elected leaders. Because Justice Scalia made it a point to say that the Supreme Court has never, ever ruled that a lawsuit is a petition of the government in accordance to the First Amendment of the Constitution. All right? You don't have to do a lawsuit to petition the government. There should be some other way. And Trump is saying, well, this is one of the ways you do it, just like this. Back to the order then. In May of 2019, the White House launched the tech bias reporting tool, which I have not been able to actually find, right? But White House launched a tech bias reporting tool to allow Americans to report incidents of online censorship. In just weeks, the White House received over 16,000 complaints of online platform censorship or otherwise taking action against users based on their political viewpoints. The White House will submit such complaints received to the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. Stopping again. So I'm saying, well, you could, if that's your complaint is about Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, so forth, well, you could go find this tech bias tool and use it, and then the White House will submit the complaints. Or you could just submit the complaints yourself. And if that's the case, well, then it doesn't just need to be against these. It can be against any unfair or deceptive acts or practices, which is really what the FTC is for. So what would those be? Well, that would be like the fact that the bank never signed the loan on your house loan, right? They never loaned you any money. And when you go to court, the attorney isn't using his name, and the judge isn't using their name, and they're really not using the proper name of the court. And, that nobody ever signs anything other than you, me, us. There's never another signature. It's always a unilateral contract. Well, those can only be for gifts or donations. They can't be for business. And so for somebody to say that they're going to take your property based on that, that's a deceptive act. If the bank doesn't sign your loan and then takes money from you, that's a deceptive act, period. So how are you going to report those things? Well, apparently you do it to the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. More on that in just a second. So the FTC shall consider taking action as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to prohibit unfair and deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. They can't make it any plainer, right? Unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce pursuant to Section 45 of Title 15 United States Code. Such unfair or deceptive acts or practices may include practices by entities covered by Section 230 that restrict free speech in ways that do not align with the entity's public representations about those practices. Stopping for a second. So it could include those, but it could include a lot of other things. And when Trump first put this out that same day or the next day, I think it was in the New York newspaper or something, it was reading in there, it said that the things that Twitter had done to Trump's tweets were not protected by Section 230 of this act, right? That they are unfair and deceptive. They didn't actually say that, but if they're not protected by this Section 230 of the particular act you're talking about, well, then they're unfair or deceptive acts or practices in affecting commerce. So, Arch Treasurer Trump, you go ahead and file a complaint. It'll work. The legal profession has already agreed with you. They just, they're not going to file it for you, but they agreed with you. For large online platforms that the vast, we're back to reading the executive order again. D, for large online platforms that are vast arenas for public debate, including social media platform Twitter, the FTC shall also, consistent with legal authority, consider whether complaints allege violations of law that implicate the policy set forth in Section 4A of this order. The FTC shall consider developing a report describing such complaints and making the report publicly available consistent with applicable law. So if we give them some data by way of complaint, then the FTC is going to make a report and put it out for all of us to see. Right? Trump's telling us what to do. This is my point. Right? Listen to the man. Go file some complaints with the FTC and see what happens. State review of unfair and deceptive acts or practices and anti-discrimination laws. The Attorney General shall establish a working group regarding the potential enforcement of state statutes that prohibit online platforms from engaging in unfair or deceptive acts or practices. Stopping again. So now that, the United States Attorney General is going to enforce state laws. They have to do with unfair or deceptive acts or practices and anti-discrimination laws. Apparently not just the federal law. He'll go ahead and enforce the state law. Back to the order. The working group shall also develop model legislation for consideration by legislatures in states where existing statutes do not protect Americans from unfair or deceptive acts and practices. So they'll write them a law and say, here, right, put this on your books. The working group shall invite state attorney generals for discussion and consultation as appropriate and consistent with applicable laws. Stopping for a second, just as soon as the attorney generals prove that they are the attorney general, because they followed the proper procedures, then they could do that. Until then, you'll just have to work without them. Complaints described in Section 4B of this order will be shared with the working group consistent with applicable law. The working group shall also collect publicly available information regarding the following: increased scrutiny of users based on the other users they choose to follow in interactions with which other users' algorithms to suppress content or users based on indications, political alignment, viewpoint, differential policies following or allowing for otherwise impermissible behavior. One committed by accounts associated with Chinese Communist Party or other anti-democratic associations or governments. All right, so it doesn't even need to be a government. It can be an association. Anti-democratic associations. Well, that would be the bar. The bar makes you give up your First Amendment right to free speech, so if you give up one part, you give up all of it. It's anti-democratic. They don't believe in our constitutional form of government. Reliance on third-party entities, including contractors, media organizations, individuals with indica the bias to review content and acts that limit the ability of users with particular viewpoint to earn money on platform compared with other users similarly situated. They're affecting interstate commerce. Yes, it's all a matter of commerce now. Legislation. The Attorney General shall develop a proposal for federal legislation that would be useful to promote policy objectives for this order. Stopping for a second. What they need to do is make it part of the common carrier, like the telephone. Right? It's intentional that the internet's not part of the common carrier, like the telephone, teletype, fax machines, that kind of stuff, because those are regulated. Right? The internet is completely unregulated. It's a lawless system. But it looks like the president's going to rein it in. Then we got some definitions. It goes ahead. So there you go. So that's what the president had to say. He said, take your stuff to the FTC, and you could use this thing called the tech bias reporting tool if you could find it. So in my own case, I do videos on YouTube, and I've had people tell me, they said, YouTube must be playing with your numbers because I watched your video once and this was the number. I went back and now the number is lower. I don't have any way to prove it. I mean, I don't know how you prove that stuff, but if somebody can show me how to prove that my numbers have been messed with, I'd be happy to file a complaint against that. But I don't have that to complain about, so I had to find something else. So I did, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So hang on, let me line a few things up. Okay, so here's the Federal Trade Commission website, protecting Americans' consumers. And the FTC protects consumers by stopping unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices in the workplace. So what I can see from this is they're telling us to use those words, right? Say it's unfair, say it's deceptive, say it's fraudulent. Those are the things that the FTC has jurisdiction over. You don't have to tie it to any law or anything. You just say it was unfair. And then give them the reason, and then they can decide. We can conduct investigations, sue companies and people that violate the law, develop rules to ensure a vibrant marketplace, educate consumers and businesses about the rights and responsibilities. We collect complaints about hundreds of issues in data security and deceptive advertising, identify theft and do not call violations and so forth and so on. And then make them available to law enforcement agencies worldwide for follow-up. So they take them and give them to law enforcement. Okay, so what I like to do, well, it says you can submit a consumer complaint. You can apply for a refund in an ongoing FTC case, and report identity theft, as an example. Now, when you go look at the FTC in Wikipedia, it says that the Federal Trade Commission is an independent agency of the United States government whose principal mission is to enforce the civil, it would be non-criminal, U.S., antitrust, and the promotion of consumer protection. The FTC shares jurisdiction over federal civil antitrust enforcement in the United States with the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. It's headquartered in Federal Trade Commission building, which looks like that. It's a beautiful looking building in Washington, D.C. So the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice, right, under the Antitrust Division, have shared jurisdiction over federal, civil, antitrust enforcement. Now, the FTC has it over non-criminal. Does that mean then that I'm assuming what they mean then is that the Antitrust Division has it over criminal. So since Trump said in the letter to Senate that, that what the White House was going to do is submit such complaints to both, well, then that's what we should do. And let them decide if it's civil or criminal, or non-criminal or non-criminal. Okay, so that's what you can do. Now, what if you wanted to file a complaint? Okay, so yeah, I want to file a complaint. What does that mean? You click on the button. I'd like to submit a complaint to the FTC. Okay. Submit a consumer complaint to the FTC. Hey, I screen printed when I did it. Let me go grab those real quick. We interrupt this transmission for just 1 second. I went to find something to show you online, and while I was there, I just found this thing. The Washington Archbishop denounces Trump's visit to Catholic shrine as baffling and reprehensible. So yesterday, he's holding a book in front of the Episcopal Church, which is basically the Church of England here in the United States. And now he's standing in front of John Paul II shrine in Washington, D.C. Wow. Trump and First Lady Melinda Trump traveled across town Tuesday for a brief visit at St. John Paul II's National Shrine. Adjacent to Catholic University of America, the shrine is a place of prayer for Catholics, but welcomes peoples of all faith. He's going to defend the faith. I find it baffling and reprehensible that any Catholic facility would allow itself to be so egregiously misused and manipulated in a fashion that violates our religious principles, which call us to defend the rights of all people, even those with whom we might disagree. Gregory said in a statement. That would be Washington Archbishop Wilton D. Gregory. Yeah, brother, there's something going on. Okay, but what I had actually gone to look at was, in case you're new to my videos, I had done a number of videos where I had talked about all the shit that Whitmer, who claims to be the governor, and now Nessel, who claims to be the the Attorney General of Michigan, are, they don't have any authority because they don't have a copy of 4 USC 101, which is the federal law that says if you want to be an officer of a state, you need to take this particular oath. IAB, state your name, do solemnly swear, support the Constitution of the United States, period. Well, that isn't the oath any of these people are taking. So nobody really has any constitution, any authority under the Constitution of the United States because they haven't satisfied the 6th article of the Constitution, which is what that particular phrase comes from out of 1 Stat 23. It's just they took it and codified it for the states under 4 USC 101. But I've gone back for quite some time saying that, Governor, I'm not judging you, I'm prosecuting you. So my complaints are based on that to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. Okay, so what did I do? Let's go take a look. Hang on here. Alrighty, so back to this page now. Submit a consumer complaint to the FTC. How do I submit a consumer complaint to the FTC? The answer, well, to report fraud, identity theft, or unfair business practices, visit ftc.gov/complaint. Click on the FTC complaint assistant icon and answer the questions. Check. So here you are. It takes you to this page, and you decide which of these is your issue. And I'm going to say all of our issues are this, that everybody that we deal with is an imposter. They're pretending to have authority they don't have. An attorney may be on the roll of attorneys in his full legal name, but when he goes to court with you, he isn't using his full legal name. Well, that's a ripoff. He's an imposter. Right? With a guy in the middle initial, that's not your full legal name, then this can't be a legal matter. It's, you're violating commerce. It's not free trade, whatever you want to call it. Right? This is the thing. Well, what are you going to call that stuff? So, but let's say that's what it was. Well, you just click this button and you got imposter scams, fake checks, prizes and sweepstakes, romance scams, and anything and something else. Someone pretending to be a well-known business, family, friend, or a government agency. Well, that's what I say that Whitmer's doing. She's pretending to be the fucking governor of the state of Michigan, which is the name of the state that was created under the original Constitution of 1835 by the style and title, the state of Michigan. But when she stands behind a podium, it just says state of Michigan. So you click that button there, present, and then did the person pretend to represent an employee of a state, local state, or federal government? Well, yes, they did. Pretend to represent employer of a business or employee of a business? Well, that's what you could say that the attorney's doing because they're claiming to be, and when you look at their signature blocks, they don't ever do it just as an attorney. They're doing it as a firm or PLC or something else, right, that they're a member of. Family member or friend, pretend to be associated with a company, offer to remove virus and malware for the computer. No, ain't got that. I'm going to say the other thing is that a attorney is an officer of the court. They have to take an oath of office, support and defend the Constitution. They're an officer of the court. So they're misrepresenting their position when they don't use their full legal name. So I did one, and so this is the one I did. We'll just look at the steps as they turned out, right? This one, click, click. Continue. Okay, then it's going to say, how did you know? Fill in what you know. If you don't know or it doesn't apply, leave it blank. That's simple enough. What date did it happen on? 1/1/2019. That's the day that, it may not have been quite the right date, because whatever day she became the governor. Right, how did you respond? Well, I mailed in my response. Okay, do you pay any money? No. Which company or government agency did the caller say they were with? State of Michigan. Now, nobody ever really called me, but it was online, whatever, right? This thing called State of Michigan. This is their address, comes off the website for State of Michigan. This is their website for State of Michigan. And the company representative was this person called the governor. Then they want you to give your information, right? Are you filing a complaint on behalf of someone else? No. Robert Allen, that's my first name. They don't ask for a middle name. You see that? So if they only ask for first name and last name, either my first name is just Robert or it's Robert Allen. And I say my first name is Robert Allen. I don't have a middle name. Therefore, I don't have a middle initial. Street address for the city, I actually used the township I live in, Oakfield Township. I didn't use the mailing city, which is Rockford. Right? I used the township. Country, USA, because that's the choice they gave. State, Michigan. 9-digit zip code. Phone number. Email address. Age. If you're filling on behalf of your small business or our organization, well, what would that be? Well, my small business name is Robert Allen Rentlewski. I actually have an EIN in that name. But everybody has this legal person. You have a natural person, a legal person, spiritual person. See, they took your person, which would be I believe it's a being with a soul. I think that's how. Well, how does Webster's? We should actually go look. How does Webster's define person? This way, if you don't agree with my definition of person, you're just disagreeing with Webster's, and there's not a lot I can do about it. It's his definition. Person. Person, come back. Okay, what is it? An individual human being consisting of a body and a soul. That is a person. It's not a natural person. It's not a legal person. It's not a spiritual person. Those are all subdivisions of person, right? It's a modified form of person. But in its original person, an individual human being consisting of a body and a soul. We apply the word to living beings only, right? So you wouldn't apply it to a thing like a corporation. Possessed of rational nature. The body, when dead, is not called person. It is applied alike to a man, woman, or child. So this is the thing, that a natural person, a legal person, or spiritual person aren't the same definition of the word person. They're different definitions. A person is a human being consisting of a soul and a body, and they're alive. Okay, so hey, I have any problem with that. I agree with it 100%. Okay, so, and then they have in here, are you a member of the U.S. Armed Forces? And I said yes, and you look. It gives you one for military, retiree, or veteran. So if you're a veteran, right, you still are a member of the forces. It says so right here. Are you a member of the armed forces? I said yes. I went and looked, and it has a spot for the status of a veteran as being somebody who's a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. This is evidence that people in the veterans are still in the military, and we've never been released, and that's the plan, and I've done many videos on this, and because of this, at some point, somebody stole your identity and gave you a disability so that you could claim disability in retirement, and that disability retirement is going into this thing called the Military Retirement Trust Fund, which has over $1 trillion in it, more than it needs to pay any bill. It gets more than enough every year from Congress to pay all it pays in benefits, right? So why does it have $1 trillion? Well, because that's money that hasn't been claimed from people who have benefits. And it goes into this fund, which is then managed by a fund manager, and the total amount to manage this fund is over $100 billion a year. So it's a big-ass boondoggle for somebody to keep a veteran's pay in that account instead of giving it to the veteran. So even though you didn't know you had this coming, it's still yours. And, according to, I've done videos on this, so I couldn't remember the exact sections anymore. But it says in Title 10 that, once they've declared you disability retired, they can't take it back from you. Right? It doesn't matter if it was done. They would have to say it had been done in fraud. And for them to do that, then they would have to say they committed the fraud. Right? So this is all the blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the page where you actually put in your stuff. Right? But this is how you file a complaint on the FTC website. Right? So 1, 2, 3. Review your complaint. So what I gave them was something like this one. All right, so Robert Allen, well, first of all, they give you an FTC number when you're done, right? They'll print this out and give you an FTC number. And you have to actually print it. But Robert Allen Bretluski, it's got all my information on there, just like you saw it. What happened? I said that Gretchen Esther Whitmer. Now, I didn't write it like this, but this is how they put it on the document. I love spaces in between all this stuff, but no, and I know why they do this is so that nobody can add anything into your document, right? So it's like a safety feature. So it was good that they did it. Gretchen Esther Whitmer has not complied with federal law 4 U.S.C. 101, oaths by members of legislatures and officers, and is therefore unqualified to be state executive officer. Gretchen Esther Whitmer is impersonating the public officer governor of Michigan and has executed an authorized legal process that counterfeit executive orders of a qualified elected chief executive officer of Michigan. Her bad faith document entitled Executive Order 2020-04 Declaration of State of Emergency is an unauthorized legal process and part of an effort to coerce the civilian population of the United States or to influence the policy or affect the conduct of the United States government by coercion. And that little phrase comes right out of the statement that's in the any general liability insurance policy have this Terrorism Risk Insurance Act rider on them, and that's the thing that determines if it's an act of terror. Is simply this: is it to influence the policy? Is it part of an effort to coerce the civilian population of the United States or to influence the policy or affect the conduct of the United States government by coercion? If it meets that, that standard, then it's considered an act of terrorism. And if you can get the Secretary of Treasury to confirm it or certify it as an act of terrorism, then you can file a claim against general liability insurance for an act of terrorism, and it pays $5 million. So this is what I've been trying to do. I want to file a claim against the state of Michigan which I did file with, against my insurance for an act of terrorism, and they're still, they don't want to pay it, obviously. But, for the same reason, I'm going to send it to the FTC now and see if I can get paid that way. So, disguised as the governor of the state of Michigan, Ms. Whitmer has executed scores of unauthorized legal processes, simulating executive orders of the governor of the state of Michigan as part of an effort to coerce the civilian population of the United States or to influence the policy or affect the conduct of the United States government by coercion. Yeah, I may have said that twice. That's good. The state of Michigan, not state of Michigan, is the free and independent state created by the people of the territory of Michigan by the Michigan Constitution of 1835 as one of the several states in union with the United States. According to its commercial general liability policy, MGL 0185248, state of Michigan is a for-profit business whose form of business is organization and whose business type is state government building. It doesn't say that they're the government on their liability insurance. It says the type of business they're involved in, state government building. And that it's an organization, not a government. Gretchen Esther Whitmer and the organization she represents, that'd be state of Michigan, are not the government of Michigan, and her unauthorized legal process offend the Constitution of Michigan, of the United States, and the laws of Michigan. Gretchen Esther Whitmer, representing the state of Michigan, has caused economic loss to over 5 million small businesses like uppercase Robert Allen Rutluski, and her every act and deed disguised as a public officer should be certified by the Secretary of Treasury as a certified act of terrorism under the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act of 2002 as amended. So that was the verbiage I put in when I filled it out. Got all done, reviewed it, and after you get done reviewing it, you can print it out, and this is what you end up with. So now the FTC has in their hands this report. I did another one, very similar, with having to do with Dana Nessel, who is impersonating a lawyer licensed to practice in Michigan, and the Public Office of Attorney General. Dana Nessel has not executed the oath required by Section 101 of Title IV of the United States Code, rendering her unqualified to the Public Office of Attorney General. So any office, right? Anybody who claims to have an office in your state, from the dog catcher to the governor, has to have filed the oath that's in 4 USC 101. And if you're going to go to a court case or you have any dealings with these people, you should give them a copy of 4 USC 101 and say, listen, brother or sister, if you don't have this oath of office filed, then you don't have any authority in the United States, and I'm not in your venue. You are in an improper venue for me. And if you continue, I'm going to file a claim against the FTC for unfair and deceptive practices. That's the idea. I didn't know those words when I filled these out, but I do know them now, and I'm going to use them from now on. If you're going to complain to the FTC, say it's unfair and deceptive acts and practices, right? That's the thing they have jurisdiction over. Dana Nessel is not the correct name of any lawyer, attorney at law, or attorney and counselor enrolled on the official register of the attorneys of the state. You can't use, she has a middle name, you got to use your full legal name on all these documents to do this stuff to register, which they do, but then they never use them, which means they're practicing without a license because Dana Dana full legal name Nessel has a license, not Dana Nessel. That's a nickname. And that's not a legal name, and you can't use it for official purposes. So Dana Nessel is not the name of any individual scribed on oath of office, motions of admission, court order for admission, or any other requirement mandated by the rules concerning the State Bar of Michigan for admission to practice in the state. Dana Nessel is not the name of any certificate of election for the Office of Attorney General. Dana Nessel is not the name on Any state identification that complies to the Real ID Act, which is 6 CFR Part 37, resulting in Dana Nessel being unsuitable identification for official purposes with federal agencies. And this is the federal government asking you to fill out under 4 U.S.C. 101, I state your name, do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States. You got to put your full legal name in there, or the federal government's not going to recognize it. Well, they didn't do it at all, so they're not going to recognize it anyways. But this is how simple it is. Show me your oath of office under 4 U.S.C. 101. I, Dana, middle name Nessel. If you ain't got one, then you're just an impersonator. We don't need to go any further about who you think you are and all these things you think you can do. You're not qualified for the office of Attorney General of Michigan unless you have frickin' taken the oath in 4 U.S.C. 101, or the governor, or the Secretary of State, or the treasurer, or a member of the legislature, or the frickin' county commissioner, or a judge, or the township commissioner, or the dog catcher, or the frickin' person handing out the frickin' parking tickets. None of those people can do a jack until they've taken the oath in 4 U.S.C. 101. So please go tell them that. Don't be afraid of them. Go tell them the truth. They need to hear it. Until the Pharisee hears the truth, he can say he didn't know better. All right, that's what Jesus said. He had to go tell the Pharisees the truth because until he had, they could say they didn't know. But now that they do know, well, now their sin is on them because they know the difference. So Dana Nessel impersonates the public officer, Attorney General, as part of an effort to coerce the civilian population of the United States or to influence the policy and affect the conduct of the United States government by coercion. Dana Nessel's bad faith acts have resulted in insured losses affecting millions of small businesses like Robert Allen Rutluski in Michigan. See, I was trying to tie all these things to the Risk Insurance Act, which I did a video on. I think it was, hang on a second here. Yeah, in this last video, Whitmer, Nessel, and Benson Esquires pointed out all their crimes, showed the documents, so forth, give you a better idea. Rule of law is a matter of public policy. It has a lot to do with what I was talking about in this video. And Uncle Sam's Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. If you want to know a little bit more about that, you'll find it in there. But I just can't get over this here, right? That I hope all the devil-worshipping pagans and satanic sock puppets are paying attention that the man's holding up a Bible in front of the Episcopal Church. And he went and visited the Catholic Church today. And I believe he's going to be the defender of the faith. And what we're seeing is the birth of the Christian nation, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, starting right now. Time will tell. Okay, what else do I want to show? I got one more thing to show you, and we'll be done. Okay, this is a Federal Trade Commission Act, Section 5, Unfair or Deceptive Acts or Practices, which I got offline, but I don't remember the link. But if you were to Google Federal Trade Commission Act, Section 5, I'm sure that you would find this. And let's have a little background. Section 5A of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which is FTC Act, which is the section they're talking about now is 15 U.S.C. 45, prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce, which is a very, very, very broad term. Just ask, the court what they believe, the court, what they believe Congress meant by commerce. It's a really, really broad definition, right? Sending a letter is commerce. Social intercourse is commerce. I got to turn off the phone for a second. This prohibition applies to all persons engaged in commerce, including banks. The board has affirmed its authority under Section 8 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Act to make appropriate actions where unfair or deceptive acts or practices are discovered. March 11, 2004, board and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation issued a joint statement regarding the agency's responsibility to enforce the prohibitions against unfair or deceptive trade practices as they apply to state-chartered banks. The joint statement contained in Appendix A of these procedures gives a complete description of the legal standards for both unfair and deceptive practices. The legal standards for unfairness and deception are independent of each other. Depending on the facts, a practice may be unfair, deceptive, or both. The legal standards for UDAP are briefly described below. Well, what makes an unfair practice? An act or practice unfair where it causes or is likely to cause substantial injury to a consumer, cannot be reasonably avoided by consumers, and is not outweighed by countervailing benefits to consumers or to competition. Public policy, as established by statute, regulation, or judicial decision, may be considered with all other evidence in determining whether an act or practice is unfair. Right? So how do you prove if something is unfair? Well, if you can find a statute, a regulation, or decision that shows it is, or just your evidence is. They'll determine it from the evidence. You don't need to have an act. It's just common law, right? Here's the facts. Did they do it? What's a deceptive practice? An act or practice is deceptive when a representation, omission, or practice misleads or is likely to mislead the consumer. Well, that's any court case you're involved in. It's any loan you're involved in. It's any collection of taxes you're involved in. Because they never use your name. It's an omission. They don't use their name, right? It's false representation. It's an omission of their full legal name, and their practices mislead you to believe it's a real court case. A consumer's interpretation of the representation, omission, or practice is considered reasonable under the circumstances, and the misleading representation, omission, or practice is material. So you don't have to, do both of these. You can do one or the other. But this is a slam dunk. Everything they do is deceptive because they don't use their name and they don't use your name And anything that's legal, which is a contract, is a legal document, you have to use legal names, and they don't do it. So, relationship between UDAP and other laws ratings. Some acts or practices may violate both Section 5 of the FTC Act and other federal and state laws. So go figure. Other acts and practices may violate only the FTC Act while fully complying with other consumer protection laws and regulations. Therefore, if a potential UDAP violation is found, examiners should consider whether other statutory or regulatory violations have occurred. Oh, you mean this may be criminal? Yes, that's what they mean. Right, so, this is in, now I don't know what this is. It's called the Consumer Compliance Handbook. Federal Trade Commission Act. But it's reading like it's in, having to do with banks exclusively. And banks are just one part of what this covers because it covers everything to do in commerce. So I think this is under the Federal Reserve because they had their own section to do with the Federal Trade Commission Act and so forth. But nevertheless, it doesn't change what they're saying, right? In order to fulfill the examination objectives stated above and consistent with joint statement, examiners should identify the bank's internal policies, procedures, and controls to be reviewed for the UDAP compliance. And I don't know there's anything else in here I need to show you. Just a statement of unfair or deceptive acts or practices by state-chartered banks. Yeah, if you say you're going to loan me money and you don't sign the form, well, then you didn't lend me any money. And then it doesn't matter how I got the house. You did not lend me any money. The other thing is on your title insurance, they don't put your name as being the insured, right? That's deceptive act because the title insurance is supposed to be for the buyer. The whole thing about a real estate transaction is a deceptive act at the end of the day, but so eventually I'll figure out how I would write that up and file a complaint. I'm just pointing it out to those who have a complaint Now, you don't need to wait. Go file something with these people. Say what they say. Pursuant to Truth in Lending Act, creditors must clearly and conspicuously disclose the costs and terms of credit, and the Truth in Savings Act require depository institutions to provide interest and fee disclosures for deposit accounts so that consumers may compare deposit products. But in any of these things, you have to have a contract. You can't, participate in commerce without a contract. Fair debt collection practice prohibits unfair, deceptive, abusive practice collection of consumers' debts. So when we were looking at the FTC, if I find that again. If we went back and said we want to do a claim, right? You got rip-offs, mobile devices, internet, education, credit and debit. Don't do it as a credit and debit because then you're giving credence to the fact that they actually lent you money, right? No, it was a rip-off. That's, go to the rip-off. That's what I say. Now they have this other one where you can do an identity theft, which I did one. So we're here. I'm still talking. So let's look at that real quick. It's not that long. Right? Like I said, the identity theft, it looks different than, this is a report, right? This is you filing a report to the FTC, and this is you filing an identity theft as a crime, a statement as a crime, and it, but it still gives you a report number. And I said in here that I never received an administrative separation order separating me from the custody and control of the United States Army. And I believe that some unknown other is enjoying pay entitlements intended for my enjoyment. Administrative errors and omissions in the DOD VA DEERS, that's the record that determines how you get your ID card. Records have caused a mismatch in information resulting in my being denied insurance, issuance of an Armed Forces of the United States Geneva Convention's identification card, or other DOD card necessary to claim entitlements. I am owed either separation pay or retirement pay, privileges, and identification. I believe my pay has been diverted to the Military Retirement Trust Fund and is used to unjustly enrich unknown others who administer the fund. And I said it was against the Department of Defense, and under penalty of perjury, I declare this information to be true and correct to the best of my knowledge. That's the unsworn statement they put on a document when it's being done in the United States. Right? I understand that making a false statement to the government may violate federal, state, local criminal statutes and may result in a fine, imprisonment, or both. And if you notice on my address, they didn't put the city or the state. They just put the street and my 9-digit zip code, which I've had Bob in Arizona. He sent me an email that way. We wanted to see if it would work, and it did. You just put the zip code, 9-digit zip code, and your street address, they'll deliver it to you. That's all they need to mail. So that was another style that you can do on the FTC by going to the FTC. I want to go back to Federal Trade Commission. I just want to go back to FTC. Oh, back to ftc.gov. Okay. This will be the main page, right? You can file a complaint. And you can report identity theft, which is what I did. And that paper looked like, well, let's go look at it real quick. Just so you have some idea what you're looking at if you go do this stuff. Because you could, stop the film, have it sitting there, be doing it, go back and look at the screenshot, see what I did, say, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, or do your own thing. But just so you know, when you get in there, they're going to ask for your information first, right? And this time they did ask for a middle name. And, well, no, it's Robert Allen. I don't have a middle name. I have a given name. It's Robert Allen. I have no middle name. I have no middle initial. And that just takes care of the problem. Last name, country. This time I got to put United States. Right? And that's where I did the thing at the bottom. The unsworn statement is the form they use when you're doing it in the United States. Yep, that stuff. For myself, my birth date, my current mailing address. So this time I used Rockford because it's my mailing address. But as you can see, they didn't use any of this other stuff. They just used the street address and the zip code. Right? Has the victim's legal name or address changed since the theft? Right? They talking about using legal name. No. Victim military service? Yes. And you do the same thing, right? Yes. Hey, I'm in the military. They said so. They got a box. One of the drop downs you can check is a military or veteran. So please do put your pay grade in. Do you know anything about the person who stole your identity? Not a bit. Have you received a copy of a credit report? No. Have you requested a fraud alert? No. Have you contacted the local police department? No, not yet. Right? Not yet. Data breach history? I don't know. Debt collectors? No. And then here's the blah blah I put in. And, almost done. So now this has been created, right? So, okay, and then just one last, well, maybe a couple more things. I keep thinking I'll be done, but I'm not quite done yet. So the other thing that Trump had said in the emergency or in the executive order was that file something with these people. So contact. Right? Report a crime. No, that wasn't what I did. Where was that thing? View. Oh, submit a complaint. Here we go. It looks like they changed this from yesterday. I'm not quite in the right spot. Give me a second. Resume. Okay, here. This is on the antitrust division section, right? So you just Google Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and you would find this page. And you can see here, they're talking about this combination of these two. This is the seal for the Department of Justice, and this is the seal for the Federal Reserve or Federal Trade Commission. If you go down here, they have a thing for report antitrust violations. Okay. To report antitrust concerns to the Antitrust Division, fully describe your concern and submit the concern to the Citizens Complaint Center. So what I did was, just a sec, I took the two consumer complaints I had done, the one against the alleged governor and the one against the alleged attorney general, and I sent them to the email address. Dear Patriot, I have attached to each Federal Trade Commission consumer complaint pertaining to unfair and deceptive acts and practices of the state of Michigan and its officers as part of an effort to coerce the civilian population of the United States or to influence the policy and effective conduct of the United States government by coercion. Further, I and every other veteran are being held a prisoner of war in Michigan by persons who failed to file an oath of office required under Section 101 of Title IV of the United States Code. All people in Michigan's civil liberties have been trampled. The state of Michigan trust must be bust. So please begin the busting. Inform me of any other information you may require to relieve the people of the state of Michigan from the terrorist organization State of Michigan. Robert Allen Rudlewski, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army Veteran, DOD ID 12112-80006. So, good stuff. I may have one more thing to show you. Hang on. When I was talking about this identity theft report, yeah, okay. I mentioned this DoD VA DEERS record, right? And so I don't remember the exact thing what DEERS stands for, but it's this record that has various elements that are shared between the two entities. And there must be errors in them because so I go to the VA and I look at my account. It used to have my name as Robert A. Rutluski. And I said, well, that's not right. I want to have it changed. And I said, my middle name's Allen. Don't have a middle name. It's Allen, right? So what did they do? They made it Robert Allen Rutluski. This is intentional, right? So that's how it stands today. This is what it looks like today. But when I go down further, so these are all the parts that would be on your VA profile, right? It has my birth date wrong. It should be September 5th, 1958. I told them to change that too, and they didn't. But I hadn't really noticed they have my dates wrong, right? That actually these dates should be like March 16th and I believe January 11th, right? That's what the DD-214 say that go to these two. I was in for 3, had a break of service for a year, went back in. So I got to do 2 DD-214s. But the dates don't match. These ending dates are not the same in this profile as they are on my DD-214. So if you're a vet, you should go look at yours, right? Because you shouldn't have a middle initial up here. That isn't how you served in the military. If I look at my DD-214, it has Rutluski, Robert Allen, but it don't have a middle initial. And it shows that the date I got out was on the 16th. But what I showed you on the VA site, it's the 17th. And but the other thing is, this is the long version, and I have the JBK for a separation code. And I found this separation program designator for codes for active service separation, official use only. And if I put in, what did I say mine was? I can never remember. That's my dad's. JBK, right? So let me go here and search on JBK. Find JBK. And it found it on the second page. And see, you got the separation pay eligible thing here. As we scroll down, mine says yes, 10%. But I never got any separation pay. All right, so if they never gave me any separation pay, then I must not really be separated. That's my whole point about this DD-214 is it's got lots of errors in it. I didn't sign mine. It says JBK, which when you read it says, that I wouldn't be able to re-enlist. But RE1A is a re-enlistment style that says I could re-enlist. And mine has an NA up here in block 9, which means either you're separated from the military, right? Separated from the custody and control of the military, or you've been disability retired. Well, I've not been separated because I didn't get separation pay, so I must have been disability retired. And there you go. So if you haven't ever seen this list before, because I had never found it until here recently, if you go to this website for military compensation, which is called militarypay.defense.gov, but you look up military compensation and go under pay and go down to recoupment. It'll be here. You got general rules, SBD codes, and legislation. That's where I found this list, which I hadn't seen before. Not the one that says official use only on it. Well, that's what this one says, official use only. So officially it says I should have gotten a separation pay. right? So I didn't get that. I didn't get um, retirement pay, and somebody stole my identity because they're not using my full legal name, right? So they're saying this is me. Well, that means you stole my identity because that isn't me, right? So that was my reasoning for filing the thing in the first place. We'll see what they do with it. But okay, hey, that's what I wanted to show. That's the last thing, I think. And thanks for sticking around. Lots going on, but the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, may be worth looking at to file a claim because they have matters to do with unfair and deceptive acts, right? And whether the Queen or King John III or the United States is now the defender of the faith, it appears to me that Trump's in the lead and that he is the arch treasurer. And he's signing checks now and converting them and giving them to us, so he's actually paying the debt off. I think that's the big thing. We normally get a check from the federal government, doesn't have that second signature on it. Only legal tender has the second signature. Otherwise, we get a check we got to go take to the bank to have it converted. But that's legal tender. Right? Should have been good for all debts, public and private. We'll find out. Okay, y'all have a great day. See you now.